Hi, everyone. Mike White here. Welcome to this week's vlog post. You've often heard the comments made about not fighting the Fed, and that holds true. And in the mortgage business, we have to pay attention to their comments, what they do, what they say. Sometimes what they don't say becomes very important. And yesterday, at least in my belief, it was really important as the Fed shook things up a little bit and we saw some reaction, and maybe it's something that is the beginning of a process that we're sure and we know is going to happen eventually, but maybe sooner than later. So what I'm talking about is yesterday when the Fed was done with its two-day meeting and released its comments about that, the bond market, at least mortgage-backed securities, really reacted sharply for the worse, and within a very few minutes, prices were off more than 20 basis points. And it's important to remember that when the Fed speaks, there often is a reaction, and sometimes it's swift and immediate in a direction that maybe you had not anticipated, and maybe like yesterday, when the dust settles, the market ended up on the plus side of things, but it was a reaction nonetheless, and the information is important, and it serves as a warning to some of you who may not have lived through a rising rate market before and what that looks like and how to live. And so I just want to go through the information yesterday, give you my take on what I saw and what my feelings are about that. Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball because world events can change things minute to minute, as we all know. But when we look at the news and what they've talked about, the big fear for people in the mortgage business, the one thing that we always keep our eye on is inflation, because inflation is the enemy of long-term interest rates. And the Fed's target at 2% had always been something that they have done and maintained for the last couple of years. And for the most part, they were under that 2% threshold, and they were doing everything in the world to stimulate. They cut rates, they were buying bonds, they were buying treasuries, they were doing everything that they could imagine to, prevent deflation and get that inflation mark up to 2%. And we saw this year inflation take hold, significantly, and the Fed came up with a word that they were using to describe it as transitory. The belief was the reason we were seeing this spike in inflation was because of supply chain issues, and once the supply chain corrected itself, things would stabilize. Well, that may or may not have been accurate. That may or may not have been true. The reality of it is at least from my perspective, we have seen 4, 5, 6% inflation numbers come out the last few months, and we're not talking as if the inflation rate, prices are going to go back to where they were last year. They're talking about now, even in their latest minutes, they're pretty proud that, inflation was 4.2%. Well, on an annual basis. Well, in June, they thought annual inflation was going to be 3.4%. And it doesn't say that we're going to give that money back or prices are going to drop back to where they were. They're still forecasting for 2022 a 2.2% in inflation rate. And as we all know, the Fed's prognostication about where inflation or interest rates or that type of stuff in the past, when you look at their predictions, their dot charts, if you will, they've been terrible. The Fed governors, for all their wisdom and ability, you look over the years at the dot charts, it's almost laughable to what they think as a group and to where the markets actually end up. And I think it's really important that we pay attention to this from our standpoint. Now, they already discussed raising interest rates, potentially 6 or 7 times over the next couple of years. They mentioned in their statement that a couple of decent numbers in the job market, and you could start seeing them ending their tapering, which is kind of what triggered everything to happen yesterday. I'm not saying that we were, at the bottom of the market, but I'm pretty confident that the January 4th numbers of this year were probably the bottom of the market. And we've been trading in a range right now that I don't necessarily know we're going to break out to the plus side, anytime soon. In fact, my belief system is, we're going to see that rise in rates through the threes and toward the fours at some point. It's going to happen as the Fed pulls the stimulus, out, as they pull all their purchases out, as they get back to a more normal market environment where they let the market dictate where rates should be instead of pressuring the market as to where they want them to be. And so I would suggest to you strongly that if you've been working your customers and working refinances, or you're even doing your loans now, and as I've had the stance for the last year and a half, if you like it, lock it. The volatility in the market makes everybody look silly at one point or another. It's about, it can't be about the emotional attachment to a rate number. It's got to be about the affordability of the payment. We all know this. Now, remember that rising interest rates, while they may affect the refi business, the purchase business is for all practical purposes in this country going to remain solid. And even as some of the activity level slows, it doesn't mean the number of houses being sold or the number of opportunities goes down. Remember, it wasn't long ago we were seeing 10, 15 offers on houses over each weekend. That number has fallen off in some cases to, maybe only 3 or 4 offers on a particular house. We may see houses actually stay on the market for a month or potentially longer. Things that were not uncommon not that long ago, but now would be shocking. As the pressure on the housing market relaxes, a couple of things will happen. Is clearly we're going to see price pressure calm down. We're not going to see this double-digit price appreciation, which I think is certainly a good thing. It's not sustainable. Most people will tell you if you can keep property appreciations between 3 and 5%, you've got a fairly healthy market. But as that competition, as the number of people fighting over the same house dissipates, the welcome sign you're going to see is you're going to bring a whole group of buyers back into the market. Those people, the FHA, VA, USDA bond program, down payment assistance, those requiring or needing sellers concessions will come back because those offers will be accepted by sellers because there is less demand for their houses. So they'll entertain those houses more. So keep in mind, again, you got to pay attention to the Fed. I don't want people glued to their rate watch apps 24/7, but you do need to be aware of key times and key instances. Next week we're going to get the September jobs report, followed the following week by inflation data. These things could all be the number when they come out that the Fed looks at and says, okay, we're going to back off some of the purchases that we're making. I'm not saying they come out tomorrow and say we're not buying any more securities, we're not buying any more mortgage bond. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when they start slowing down and the pressure starts to equalize and the markets start to grab hold of taking control of where pricing is, it is my belief that it's going to lead to an acceleration in the rate market going higher. How quickly and how sharply, obviously nobody knows. There's a lot on the plate. Could it be in the fourth quarter of this year? Sure. Could it be the first quarter of next year? Sure. But I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. And if you're not prepared for it, and if your business plan for 2022 doesn't incorporate the fact that you're going to have to start planning for the fact that those people who are doing 50, 60, 70, 80% or more refinance business are really going to have to look to see are their businesses sustainable when a large portion of that business goes away. Purchase business, I think, will remain solid. I don't see that backing off, especially on the resale side. I don't see that slowing up in total numbers of units over 2022. But again, it is still subject to what goes on with all the different political and national news and events and things that are happening. Always are subject to what happens in the marketplaces. But you do need to be aware of the information, that at least you know when it's going to happen, so that you are prepared and have an opinion as how you're going to go about looking at that information and being aware of what's happening and how to guide your clients and your referral partners through this information, especially when there could be significant volatility. As always, questions and comments are welcome. Mike at imtcoaching.com. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care.